Winner, winner, Utah dinner. TCU goes to Salt Lake City and gets a win over the Utes, much needed coming out of the bye week. We're going to talk about that and much more on this episode of Frogs Insider. Welcome in, Frog fans, to another episode of Frogs Insider presented by the Flying T Club. My name is Jamie Plunkett, here alongside Melissa Treebosser, as always, ready to break down a 13-7 TCU football win over the Utah Utes on the road. Hostile environment. Was it pretty? No. Was it always good? Also no. But it was a win, and that's what matters. So TCU is now 4-3. They're 2-2 in Big 12 play. Maybe they figured a couple things out. Maybe a couple other issues, old issues cropped up. We're going to break it all down on this episode. Melissa, you and I were both there, though. Pretty cool atmosphere for a football game.
It was a very cool atmosphere for a football game. I really enjoyed my time in Salt Lake, as short as it was, and thought that Utah does football Saturday nights really, really well as a university. I'm sure my experience was colored by the fact that TCU got an unexpected win, but I will say it would be really fun to go and get to actually experience a little bit more of that. But we made the most of our 22 hours on the ground in Utah.
I would say so. We got to sample some of the local cuisine, if you will, which is also known as bar food, while we sat and watched every other football game that happened before TCU and Utah kicked off.
Which was all of them.
Midnight, basically. Yeah. So pretty fun weekend in Salt Lake City. Pretty cool to get up there for a football game. Like I said, we're going to talk about all of that stuff. But first, a little podcast business. We are the Frogs Insider podcast presented by the Flying T Club, TCU's NIL collective, TCU's only NIL collective. So if you go to flyingtclub.com, you can learn more about the Flying T Club. They sponsor over 110 student athletes. They partner with a variety of organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth, doing really, really good work. They're pretty cool and somewhat, they stand apart a little bit from other NIL collectives simply because they are a 501c3 nonprofit. And what that means is that your gift has different tax implications than other gifts to other NIL collectives, but it also means that they are giving back. It means that they are partnering with organizations in and around Fort Worth. They're connecting student athletes with these organizations to make the community better, bring some joy to the community of Fort Worth, which I think is just a really cool aspect of the Flying T Club. So if you go to flyingtclub.com, you can see all of the things that they are doing and how you can get involved. So go to flyingtclub.com today. Also, a big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network, a network of podcasts that includes a show for each of the 13 D1 football programs in the state of Texas. You can get a feed with all of those shows just going where you get your podcasts and searching Republic of Football Network. That feed will pop up. You can subscribe, leave a rating and a review. If you just want TCU stuff, though, which a lot of you do, and if you don't know, we have extra shows in just our exclusive Frogs Insider feed, wherever you get your podcasts, and on the YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to the Republic of Football Network, that's great, and you should, but you won't get every Frogs Insider show. So just being honest, being open. Go find Frogs Insider's feed wherever you get your podcasts. Go to the YouTube channel. Melissa, we crossed the 800 subscriber threshold on the YouTube channel, which means we're getting closer. We're 11 days. Can we get to 1,000 subscribers in 11 days? It's going to be close, I think. But
we're at 813 as of the moment that we were recording this. I just double checked, so it's getting there. It's getting close. I think we can make it happen. I think the win is going to get people fired up again, and they're going to want to subscribe to the YouTube channel because they're going to want to watch my preview with Gambling Gauchos. Just a little self-promotion, a little plug there, but and it's not at all to do with me. We all know this, but those guys, and we're hoping to get them both on. Kyle and Rob, but that will be entertainment, especially coming off of their performance in Waco on Saturday.
Yeah, have we done a wellness check on Kyle and Rob? Do we know if they're still around? Okay.
Yeah, when I reached out, I asked if they had enough time to grieve and process their feelings, and if so, if they were ready to turn the page and talk about the saddle. To which I got, I'm sure one of us at least, maybe both could do it, and that was that tone, even though it was in a text. I inferred that. But yeah, I have concerns. I have worries. I need Baylor to lose whoever. I don't even know who they're playing, but because I want Matt and Evan at their very worst as well.
Sure.
Because that's more enjoyable.
It truly is. Let's see who Baylor is playing next week. That's a great question to ask. So I'm going to do a little what's called great radio and just do a quick search on the Google internets. Baylor hosts Oklahoma State this weekend at 2:30.
Oh, that is a battle of two teams that are still going to be pretty dang desperate. Even after that win, I still would classify Baylor in the desperate category.
And Oklahoma State almost we got this on the run sheet for a little bit later, but Oklahoma State almost went up to Provo and took down BYU. So
yeah,
maybe there's something turning. Maybe the tides are turning for Baylor and Oklahoma State for now.
Right, and of course they would be right as they are next on TCU's schedule, because of course that is how these things are going to work. Because we have yet to see TCU win back-to-back games against FBS level opponents. So they're hoping to do that for the first time this season against Texas Tech at home on homecoming, and the Red Raiders are coming off of, like I said, we'll talk about it later, but just a unbelievable defeat down at Baylor.
Quite wild. 59-24, I believe was the final.
Yeah.
That's almost as bad as the 82-27 when you really think about it.
Almost.
Like if you really think about it. It's
I'm going to bring that up. I'll bring that up with the boys. Yeah.
Did Baylor run out of fireworks? I know the game was in Lubbock, but did Baylor also run out of fireworks?
Oh God, that game was in Lubbock. That wasn't even in Waco. It was in Lubbock. It was homecoming.
Correct.
I think I'm rewriting history just because I do feel so terribly for how things went for them. That was their homecoming game. That is a thing I did know and just talked about incorrectly for the first 6.5 minutes of this podcast.
We're doing great.
One thing we don't need to talk about incorrectly is the fact that, as you mentioned, TCU did come away with a win in Utah. I want to kind of go through the positives and negatives here.
Can I tell a story first?
Please. I would love for you to.
I texted you this. So on our flight back, first of all, I'm cheap. People need to know this, so I don't ever do like the seat upgrade thing, or all I care about is an aisle seat. That's all I care about. So on our flight back from Salt Lake City this morning, I was row 33. I was like third row from the back of the plane, but I was an aisle seat, so I did not care. Back in that section of the plane was the majority of TCU cheer, and so a bunch of cheerleaders back there. I think their coaches were back there as well, and there were some other TCU fans on this flight as well. So if you're listening to this and you were on that 8:53 flight out of Salt Lake City this morning that was delayed for 2 hours, where we just sat on the plane, this is a story for you as well. So we're sitting there on the plane. There was a chair that was messed up in first class. First class seat couldn't get out of recline. Big
Typical.
Bad, big disappointment. So we were on the runway about to take off and then had to turn around, go back to the gate. Maintenance had to come on the plane, fix the plane. Then we got back out to the runway. Then we had to wait for a lot longer because the new timing and flight plan and stuff hadn't been approved by whoever approves that in the system. And so we had to wait for that to get signed off on, and there was an issue on their end and blah, blah, blah. So it ended up being we got on the plane at about 8:25 and we didn't take off until...
It was after 10.
10:30.
Yeah.
Realistically,
it was
we were on the plane for roughly 2 hours before we took off.
I think in total we were on the plane longer than we slept the night before.
I think that's fair. I think I got
accurate.
I think I got 3 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
because
I was about
when the
the
football
same.
game ended, when we had to get to the airport. So what I did not realize until we were about to take off, Melissa, one of the guys on TCU cheer was a row behind me in the window, and apparently he boarded and knocked out, passed out, fell asleep right away. He woke up and I hear him doing all of the wake up noises, and one of the other cheerleaders is sitting next to him, and he looks at her and he goes, how are we almost there? And she goes, "No, sweetie, we haven't taken off yet." And he goes, "What? No way. No, that can't. How long was I asleep?" She goes, "You were asleep for 2 hours." Because there's no way. And he opens the window shade and he sees that we're still on the runway. This man was devastated. This man, his world was crumbling down around him in this moment. He was so happy, I think, to expect to get this awesome nap in on the plane, wake up, be 20 minutes from DFW. Oh, that's great nap, land, get in the car, go home. No, sorry, bud.
No.
Nap, wake up still in Salt Lake City, still have a 2.5-hour flight ahead of you. Thoughts and prayers. So that was just it was a very funny experience after what was 2 frustrating hours on the airplane.
Yes, yeah, that was the first time I've ever been delayed because a chair wouldn't unrecline. But it was quite the party plane. Every important TCU person I felt was on it.
Every important person, including Landry Burdine.
Yes.
And then also somehow Brian Estridge made his way on the plane too.
Yes, they've got a little charity case there. It's fine. But yeah, it was a great trip. It was a great experience. There was a lot to enjoy about just the entirety of the time there. Most importantly, the great company that we got to be a part of and hang out with, which was fun. Our intern Colin Post made an appearance in the press box. Welcome back, Colin, to the beat. Temporarily. So yeah, it was an absolutely great experience. Glad we did it. And like I said, TCU got a win. And so as we approach the second half of the season, they came in 3-3. They get over 500 now for, I think, the second time, if you want to, something like that, if you want to count 1-0. And all of a sudden you start to say, okay, we talked about this last week. What are the expectations? What is realistic? And I think you and I both were pretty confident that Saturday night would look like an L. We knew Cam Rising would be out. Mekhi Bernard got banged up a little bit, still played. But the TCU defense really seemed to rise to the challenge coming out of the bye week and potentially turned a corner. Although, do we need to kind of caveat this a little bit, or do we just get excited about just kind of the way they played like their pants were on fire the entire game?
I think the first takeaway needs to be the TCU won, right? Like,
yes.
Let's not lose the forest for the trees here.
For sure.
We've been talking about how rough the first half of the season was, getting to 3-3 when you really, even with as poorly as you played, you could have pretty easily been 5-1. And so being 3-3, obvious disappointment. Coming out of the bye week where we heard about fundamentals and more good practices and some concern about what this game would look like. Coming away from Salt Lake City, a Big 12 road win is a good thing. Now, yes, we're going to talk about some of the things that were not good that happened during this football game. But at the end of the day, you won a football game in conference. You pushed Utah closer to the bottom of the standings when they thought they were going to come in and just run the show. And you righted the ship for a couple of days. So I think at the end of the day, that's probably the biggest takeaway. But the minutia of how you got there, some of the struggles, some of just the simple coaching errors that continue to happen with this team, which we're going to get into, late subs. I was all caps texting Jeremy. We were texting back and forth during the game. Just how is this still an issue after a month worth of football games? But at the end of the day, I think the biggest takeaway is that you won the football game, and now you have an opportunity to take all of the positives from that win, work on some of the negatives from that win, and hopefully string a little bit of a run together here.
Well, and I think that's kind of where we have to kind of set the bar for this season is in all 3 of these wins. I think the message has been, like, at least as we've talked about it, has been kind of, you would rather have teaching points after a win than a loss, obviously, as a coach. But there isn't a game that we can look at of those 4 wins, and really like the 3 against power opponents, where you say, this is the TCU we expected to see.
Yeah.
So out, grind out a win on the road, a Big 12 road win. It doesn't matter who the opponent, like going up to Kansas and winning was a big deal. Going out to Utah and winning was a big deal. Absolutely. Especially for a team that so desperately just needs to win. But I think we have to. You're right. I don't want to lose forest for the trees. I don't want to just say, okay, we won. Let's move on. This team still has issues, whatever. But it's kind of okay. Now we have to reset. What are the expectations for this next one? Can they go out and string together a couple of wins? Because when you look at the next couple of opponents, certainly winnable games on the schedule. But when you look at how TCU is winning, can they continue to win this way against maybe more seasoned and experienced opponents than what they saw Saturday based on who was on the field for the Utes?
Yeah, every one of the games on their schedule left is winnable. Every
sure.
one of the games left on their schedule is also losable.
For sure.
And I think that's kind of the key from just that perspective. But you're right. Look, let's jump into it a little bit. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball, Melissa, because that was really truly regardless of what you think of Utah's offense at this point, the challenges that they're facing from an offensive coordinator standpoint, from a quarterback standpoint, personnel, a couple other spots, especially along that offensive line, doesn't seem to be where Utah normally is. This was the best defensive performance we've seen from TCU this season, bar none.
Absolutely.
And I think that there were two things that stood out to me the most. First of all, was the way that, and Sonny mentioned this after the game, they sold out to stop the run, which was a game plan based on who was playing quarterback, because it wasn't Cam Rising, it was Isaac Wilson, the true freshman who has played in 4 or 5 games already this season before Saturday night. So it's not like he was just a deer in the headlights true freshman who, had never seen the field before. He had a couple notches on his belt from earlier this year. He was 1-1 in Big 12 play as a starter coming into Saturday night. So like he had seen some reps. But TCU really dared him to throw the football, and it worked.
Yeah.
So we saw in that regard two different things. First is that they loaded the box, which is something that I've been banging the drum for quite a while, as TCU just gets run over through the middle of the field these last several weeks. They loaded the box. They dropped down the safeties. They really made sure, hey, Bernard, you're a great running back. You're not beating TCU tonight. And they held Utah to 68 rushing yards on the night, which I thought was very impressive. The second thing was they were aggressive to an extent that we had not seen since the Stanford game. Not just running to the football, gang tackling, all of that kind of stuff, but also the exotic blitz packages, where they were sending pressure from, how they were getting to the football. All of that looked a lot different than what we had seen from TCU's defense since week 1. And it almost feels like Avalos, in getting back to some of the fundamentals of his defense, said, you know what? Maybe we're going to give up some big plays. And TCU did give up a 71-yard touchdown pass. But we're also going to make sure that this quarterback is never comfortable. And I would much rather see that style of a defense than the defense we've seen for the last few weeks and that we saw for all of 2023, which was, hey, we might not get much pressure and we might not give up too many big plays, but you're going to be able to nickel and dime us down the field pretty much at will. So those were the two things that stood out to me defensively, Melissa, that I thought were some things that TCU adjusted during the bye week and then executed really, really well on Saturday night.
Well, I think the key, and this, you mentioned this, is that they were able to put pressure on Isaac Wilson. And the reason they were able to put pressure on Isaac Wilson is because they held up in the run on early downs. Utah wanted to run in the ball. They came in with a game plan of take the pressure off of Wilson's shoulders. TCU defensively has been vulnerable to the run. And so, you've got Mekhi Bernard. You have some other options in that aspect. There were things that they could do if they were able to be successful on early downs, but they ended up in so many second and longs and so many third and longs. Utah played behind the chains for the vast majority of the game. There were false starts, there were penalties, all of those types of things that put TCU in an advantageous situation that they were actually able to take advantage of it. And, you have absolutely been banging the drum on get an extra guy in the box, and they did that. And they played a quarterback where they could afford to do that and they could take those risks, and it only hurt them once. But it was the run defense, it was the swarming of the ball, it was closing those gaps and playing disciplined gap defense. I think that enabled them to not get burned more than that one big touchdown. I think my favorite stat in the running game for Utah is that Isaac Wilson had, and these of course counts sacks, but had 11 rushing attempts for 11 yards with a long of 15. And that to me just tells you how effective TCU was at getting into the backfield. You've got to give a huge shout out to Devin Deal, who was excellent. Marcel Brooks. This was the type of game, and you mentioned this at the airport this morning. Everyone has been clamoring for more Marcel Brooks. Well, said it. He's a specialist. Like, he has a skill set that they have not been able to unleash because of the way teams have been attacking that TCU defense. This was a game where, again, because they got Utah into obvious passing situations, you could unleash Marcel Brooks to see ball, get ball. And he had an excellent, excellent game in that regard. And to do this without Cooper McDonald, I think is even more impressive, as he's been one of the more effective pass rushers this season.
Yeah, that's a big part of this, too, is Cooper McDonald was out with an injury. Devin Deal started in his place. Like you said, Devin Deal had a great game. First multi-sack game of his career. He posted 2 sacks. Marcel Brooks, my favorite play from the night was Actually, a play where Isaac Wilson got a few rushing yards because he avoided, I think, 3 sacks on the same play from Marcel, who just would not stop trying to get him to the ground. But Wilson, to his credit, did a very good job of avoiding what had to look like the Tasmanian Devil just running straight for his face. And I think he ended up gaining like 3 or 4 yards on the play. But for me, the biggest stat of the night is that Utah was 2 of 15 on third downs. They started 0 of 6 on third downs, and that was so crucial because of what was happening on the offensive side of the football for TCU. If the defense had not come out with their hair on fire like that, this is one of those games where Utah starts to establish themselves on the ground. Isaac Wilson gets comfortable, makes a couple quick, easy throws to get into a rhythm, and then all of a sudden, Utah scored a touchdown. Maybe they kicked another field goal, and you're down 10-0 because the offense got off to a really bad start.
Yeah.
Especially in the red zone, and then you're chasing again, right? And so TCU's defense set a different tone, put TCU ahead instead of behind, and we saw a different Horned Frogs football team because of it. So really, really great, really great football game from the defense. A couple of issues still. Secondary wise, JT Broughton got burned by Money Parks pretty good on Utah's only touchdown of the night, 71-yard pass where Parks. I think I showed you the screenshot. I'm not sure. I was talking to Colin and Steven Johnson about it. They go Utah goes 2 out to the right. They motion their outside receiver inside of Money Parks, which puts Broughton on Parks. And at the snap, Broughton immediately, instead of just a normal DB drop, turns his back and starts running, and then looks back over his outside shoulder towards the sideline as Money Parks is running past his inside shoulder on a deep post. And so by the time Broughton gets his head turned around to see where Money Parks is, he's looking at the back of his jersey, can read his name, and then all Isaac Wilson has to do is get the ball out there.
Yeah.
And let Parks run under it because he's fast. He's incredibly fast. Money Parks, Alito native, by the way.
Yeah.
Money Parks.
And that was one of the rare times that Isaac Wilson had time to set his feet and get a good look down the field. It was one of the few times he had a pretty clean pocket. It was a perfect scenario for Utah. They did a great job taking advantage.
Yes, they did. So still some questions there. Sonny did say that he liked the tackling. TCU still missed 11 tackles on the night. I think, though, because it didn't look like TCU typically when they miss a lot of tackles, like the Houston game, you could tell when they were missing tackles. I think some of the missed tackles in this case, although there were still a few that were pretty obvious, some of these I think were like gang tackling related, like hit the first guy, stun him, next guy comes and gets him down.
Yeah.
Those kinds of situations. And that's why when maybe you don't have the best tackling team, everybody's got to get to the ball as quickly as possible because even when you miss 11 tackles, that's the first time TCU's won this year when they've had double-digit missed tackles. So, I think there's just a different attitude. There are still some things that they can clean up on that side of the football. But if they can maintain that kind of energy, I think we'll see a much better defense from TCU through the second half of the football season.
Well, you mentioned attitude, and one of my favorite things about the night was the way TCU rolled out of that tunnel. I mean, there were a lot of boos. It was loud, and they were doing the, come on, bring it on, bring it on. Johnny Hodges was facing the stands as much as he was facing the opposing quarterback. They were talking their you-know-what the entire game, which is all well and good because they won, right? Yep. But I will say I liked that they came out with that fieriness and that attitude, and they came out like the better team, not the team that wasn't favored. And I think that that's really important. And Sonny mentioned in his post-game press conference about confidence and how a win like this, even though, again, he was very, he's very honest in that it wasn't perfect, that it wasn't, they didn't execute everything they needed to execute. But he said it was the first time they played complimentary football in all 3 phases of the game, which, yes and no. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt there. But that they played confidently. And I don't know if it's just the bye week coming at the right time, if they needed that reset, if they needed to kind of step away a little bit. But that team came out like they knew they were going to win. And they were giving it to the fans back. They were having fun. There was a lot of enthusiasm on the sideline. I mean, Caleb Fox was getting in guys' faces after the game, like, we got to bring this to practice all week. Like, we're not done. This is just the start. I heard a lot of, because Utah's actually one of the few football fields where you could walk behind the bench and you're not allowed to stop and take photos or anything. But because it's so long and it's so wide, you can actually hear kind of some of what's going on around. And I thought that the vibes there was a lot of competitiveness. There was a lot of kind of getting in guys' faces in the right way. But there was a lot of energy on the sidelines last night that we haven't really, and I wasn't at Houston, but that I hadn't seen in the last several games.
And I think that's indicative of something that Sonny has been talking about even in the losses, is that the team, unlike 2023 where he's been honest, hey, that team kind of fell apart in the locker room, he's been adamant this whole year that is not the case with this team in 2024. So regardless of results, this is a team that is, to this point, stuck together, continued to work hard, continued to try and grow and learn and progress. And we saw some really good glimpses of that on Saturday night. But the reason that this was a 13-7 football game, Melissa, the reason that this wasn't an absolute blowout, which it could have been, it very easily could have been, is because there were some issues on the offensive side of the football that aren't new, aren't overcomplicated, and frankly aren't something that should still be happening week 8 in the second season with this offensive coordinator. And, you have a defense putting a performance like they did on Saturday night out onto the field, and then the offense really just couldn't do anything with it. It's like the dog that caught the car almost. And it's like, oh, okay, I finally got here. Now what do I do with this thing? We finally have a chance. Now how do we execute? TCU started, they got the ball, they won the coin toss, elected to receive, and then put together an absolute masterclass of a scripted drive to get inside the 10-yard line. It was a beautiful drive to start the football game. A beautiful drive. Let's go through, let me pull up really quickly the play-by-plays here. First play, Hoover hits Savion Williams for a 10-yard gain. Next play, Savion direct snap for a 15-yard rushing gain. Next play, Hoover hits a dump off to Cam Cook, turns it into a 12-yard first down. 3 plays to start the game, 3 first downs for TCU. Then, negative play, Cam Cook rushing. Hoover hits Cook with a pass for 1 yard, a deep pass for 17 yards on 3rd and 14 to J.P. Richardson. Richardson makes a diving catch. And
right in front of me.
This was also our first glimpse of Trent Battle in the evening, because Trent Battle picked up a blitz on this play and absolutely bodied the linebacker that was coming straight for Josh's head, giving him time to get the throw off. It still wasn't a great throw. JPR went out and made a really great catch. After that, an incomplete pass, a pass to Trent Battle where he gets a first down as a dump-off play, and then a fumble at the 10 to turn it over. So another red zone turnover. It's another fumble at the point of exchange, where Hoover, as he said after the game, didn't pull it back strong enough. And you can see on the slow motion replay, as soon as he starts to pull it back, that ball is out.
Yeah.
And he couldn't quite get it as he's trying to go out to the right to keep it and maybe look for a guy in the end zone, and it falls to the ground and like 3 Utes fall on top of it. And it's just an absolute momentum killer, an absolute vibe killer after a bye week to come out and on your first offensive drive, put some really impressive stuff on film, and then just let the drive slip away through your fingers like that. Shout out to the defense, because they came out, forced a 3 and out, and then special teams, Shad Banks blocked the punt, putting you right back in the red zone again.
Yep.
And then you go 3 and out, and you get the field goal blocked. And so within the first 5.5, 6 minutes of the football game, TCU's already 0 for 2 in the red zone. Same issues that we've been seeing from a blocking perspective, from a fumbles and ball security perspective. Now, that was TCU's only turnover of the night. So they fixed a couple things later on, although it very easily could not have been the only turnover of the night, because of some of the passes Josh threw, some lazy route running as well, that caused some miscommunication. But TCU ends up 3 for 5 in the red zone, Melissa, with just 1 touchdown, 2 field goals inside of 30 yards. They got inside Utah's 10 3 times. They got inside the 5 twice, and they only came away with 1 touchdown on the night. That's just not going to cut it against an offense that's better than Utah's coming down the road, which Tech has a better offense. Oklahoma State has a better offense. Baylor likely has a better offense at this point. If you want to keep up, if you want to win football games, you can't get inside the opponent's 5 and settle for a field goal. And TCU did that twice on Saturday night.
I mean, if you look at the drive chart, and we cannot absolve Utah and their inefficiency on offense either, but this is, I heard someone compare it to the Cheez-It Bowl without the interceptions, and it did have some Cheez-It Bowl vibes for sure. But, I mean, there was a string of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 consecutive drives between the two teams that ended in a punt.
Nice.
That is abhorrent. That is absolutely abhorrent.
Not good.
And again, when Sonny says, "Hey, we played complimentary football," I mean, again, yes and no. The defense gave, I think, for what we've seen and where they are on the sliding scale at this point, an A performance. Absolutely, it's their best performance of the year. Is it the best they're capable of doing? No, but is it an A, like in the metrics of the spider graph of what we've seen so far? Absolutely, I'd give them an A. But then the offense was like a D-. Like, other than the fact that Josh didn't throw any interceptions, some of that was luck, some of that was better decision making. They could not execute. They only getting to the red zone 5 times is a failure. Now, this is a decent Utah defense. They have not been giving up a lot of points. They allow fewer than 20 points per game. But this is a TCU offense that had shown it could be explosive, but has really, struggled now over the last couple of weeks to finish drives, to get themselves in a position to score and then be able to execute. I think part of that is still the run game is not where it needs to be. I know you want to talk about Trent Battle, and I'm going to give Trent Battle to you to talk about tonight. But using Savion Williams as a running back, as a direct snap and kind of that wildcat formation, there's a lot of positives to that, but that also, again, I think shows the inefficiency of what you're able to accomplish with your quote unquote natural running backs. And the wide receivers, JP Richardson had a really great game. I don't really feel like we talked about him a whole lot post game and kind of in looking at this game as a whole, but he didn't necessarily put up massive stats. But you mentioned the third down conversion. He had a couple of those on 3rd and long where he hauled in really tough catches and kept drives alive. Jack Besh was quietest game that he's had this season. He was, and Utah, I'm sure, was trying to shade over to him and take him away. Savion didn't have a great game catching the ball, but made huge plays in the running game and sealed it with that 4th down conversion. But we just didn't see the consistency that we've expected from that position group. And it's very clear to me that Hoover and the wide receivers are not on the same page right now. Just kind of overall as a unit. And I don't know, coming off of a bye week, I would have hoped that, like you said, especially with how beautiful that first drive was on script, that we would have seen a little bit more rhythm from the offense. And that was not the case. Credit Utah's defense, but TCU just shot itself in the foot so many times in so many different ways and could not get out of their own way when it came to actually being able to finish drives and get in the end zone. You got away with it against a very inept offense in Salt Lake City. And again, I don't want to just it's a win. It's an important win. It's a critical win. But you're not going to get away with that against Texas Tech more than likely, despite what happened to them in Lubbock on Saturday.
So a couple things about that, because I think there are some intricacies here that are causing some of these problems, because every problem has an origin. Every problem has a starting point. And I think the reason we're starting to see some of these problems consistently is because of some other things that are happening. Before I get into that, though, you're right. There were some really big issues with TCU on offense on Saturday night. I mentioned that Utah went 2 of 15 on 3rd down. TCU was just 4 of 17. And so just,
and I think 3 of those were the first 2 drives.
Right, and they were also generally not 3rd and 5 or 3rd and short. They were 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 14. You're really, when you have to direct snap to Savion Williams 7 times, yes, it worked out for you. Yes, it helped you get the ball to the edge, which is what Sonny said they wanted to do with that formation. But also, it's an indicator of how much you're struggling in the running game generally. Now, Trent Battle rocks. I just want to say that right out of the gate. and I said this to Steven in the press box while the game was happening, Trent Battle went to the Imari DiMercado School of Running Backs.
Absolutely.
He is going to block his ass off. He is going to make sure that nobody touches his quarterback. He's going to be where he needs to be in the running game, and he's going to be there in the passing game as well to catch the dump off, the check down. And he did all three of those things really, really well on Saturday night. He had 8 carries for 45 yards, so a little over 5.5 yards a carry. Excellent. He had 2 catches for 19 yards, including a first down in the first quarter. He picked up blitzes 3 or 4 different times. And the best part about it all was his attitude when we talked to him post game, because he got hurt in fall camp. He hasn't been healthy enough to play. He got back this week and was just so excited to make a difference, and he was so thankful for the opportunity to make a difference. And then Steven asked him, "Hey, what's your mentality when you're picking up blitzes, when you're in pass protection?" And he smiles really big. You can go watch the video of his interview on Frogs Insider's YouTube channel. And he goes, "Bad intentions."
Love it.
He's like, "You can't be timid. You can't be hesitant." He's like, "I got to keep my quarterback clean so he can make his read and make big plays." And then he talked about the defense tackling with bad intentions. And I think that's a kind of a grit that I don't think TCU's really had to this point in the season. And if they can get some extra grit and a little bit of bad intentions from Trent Battle and the way that he approaches the football game, I think TCU's going to be a much better football team in the second half of the season. How that translates to wins, I don't know. But I think that we'll see a more active football team than we did in the first half of the year. Now, to these issues, I think that there is a structural and a systematic issue with TCU's offense when it comes to what they're asking Josh Hoover to do and how much time pre-snap they're giving him to do it. So I mentioned the late substitution issues that TCU's been having the last 4 weeks. It started with UCF, where we would see TCU complete a play or have an incompletion or something, and then they would sub. But the subs aren't getting out onto the field until there are 20 seconds left on the clock, on the play clock, which means that you've only got 5 seconds until the helmet comm's cut off, because they cut off at 15 seconds. And then you're allowing the defense, which is allowed to sub every time you sub, to roll out a couple defensive linemen, bring some slow defensive linemen off of the field, and all of a sudden Josh Hoover's looking at the defense for the first time, trying to process what's happening with his play and how the defense is aligned, with 5 seconds left on the play clock. And so you're giving your quarterback, who this was his 13th career start, still a young quarterback, 5 seconds pre-snap to discern what's going to happen when the ball comes his way. That's just not enough time. It's not enough time for a young quarterback. It's not enough time for a veteran quarterback in college football to say, okay, consistently 5 to 7 seconds to process pre-snap what's actually going on. That gives you no time for any pre-snap motion. It gives you no time for any kind of check down or audible into something safe. It gives you no time to look to the sideline for your offensive coordinator to give you another call. You're setting yourself up so in such a restricted way every single snap when you're subbing as much as TCU subs. And it's happened for 4 games in a row. And every single game in post-game, Sonny Dykes has come out and said, yeah, we've got to get that fixed. And it doesn't get fixed. And so this is my theory on why TCU's offense has struggled, especially the last 2 weeks, because Houston and Utah both picked up on this from UCF and Kansas. Yeah, we're just going to roll out a defensive lineman with 10 seconds left on the play clock because we know TCU's going to sub. And then we're going to make sure that they don't have any time to change what they're doing based on our defensive set. And so you're setting yourself up for failure, both from a ability to audible and be creative offensively standpoint, but also just from a time on the clock standpoint. They had to burn a timeout in the fourth quarter because of it on Friday night or on Saturday night, which leads into another really interesting piece of this football game, and that was frankly the point where I was most convinced that TCU was not going to hold on to win. So I just it at some point, and this is not an execution. We talk a lot about execution and TCU's lack of execution, because they have lacked execution on the field quite a bit this year. This is a coaching issue. When you are constantly putting your players behind the 8 ball with 5 seconds left on the clock, that's a coaching issue, and Sonny has to look at his offensive coordinator and say, if you're running 11 or you're running 12 personnel, you're running 12 personnel. If you've got Besh and Williams and Dalen on the field, you've got Besh and Williams and Dalen on the field. If you've got Cam Cook in the backfield, you've got Cam Cook in the backfield. Can't keep doing this revolving door of subs every single play, or it's going to keep the same issues are going to keep cropping up. And it's baffling to me that it's an issue that's already been identified. There is a relatively clear solution to it, and nothing has been done about it yet.
Well, isn't that kind of a big part of the Browns offense is its simplicity? They only run a handful of sets, and they have different looks out of that. And I don't know if the different looks needs to be different personnel too, but I don't feel like this is a problem that we didn't see this last year, maybe because they were running 100 plays a game, and so there wasn't even time to sub because the tempo was too fast. And now he's kind of swung the pendulum the opposite way. And not that they're slowing down, but with the helmet comms, he's probably, I would imagine, maybe overthinking it or trying to get too cute, because you feel all those options are out there. There's too many things you can do, and there's too much communication that can happen, instead of just trusting your guys to do their job better than their defensive opponent in those moments, which we've seen, some success in some games and obviously less in others. But I think it's a really good point. And when I think about the substitutions and that issue, I think about the timing of it, and I think about how it gets you out of a rhythm. I hadn't thought about what a weight that puts on Hoover's shoulders as far as being able to read the defense's reaction and to be able to kind of get a good pre-snap read. I hadn't really thought of it in that way. So I think that's an awesome point that you brought up, and it makes a lot of sense and could certainly explain some of the inefficiencies, the inability to get in a good rhythm for that side of the football.
Like it feels, and I'm not a football coach. We know this. People who are listening, I'm not a football coach. You can tell me I'm not a football coach later. It's fine. It seems like there's an obvious solution, and maybe it's less obvious. And to be fair, coaches are also adjusting to some of the new rules in college football this year as well. Coaches are also adjusting to helmet comms. Coaches are also adjusting to running clock. Coaches are everything is an adjustment for the players and the coaches. So I don't want to be unfair and only get after coaching when they are making adjustments on the fly too, and it's all of the things, right? Long list. And yet, as much as we talk about when things are definitively on the players to correct, we got to talk about when things are definitively on the coaches to correct. Yeah. So let's talk about the other weird situation that happened on Saturday night, because this was one where I appreciate Sonny for his candor. I appreciate Sonny for his accountability and his honesty in press conferences, because it is truly still 2.5 years removed from the last regime. Very refreshing. It is. And I like Sonny a lot. I think that this is one of his best qualities, is to be as open and accountable as he is, truly. I didn't think he gave a great answer on Friday night or on Saturday night when you asked him about this situation. So let's set the scene here. About 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter. TCU's facing a 3rd and 2 from the Utah 34, and it's a situation where they're up 13-7, and you're thinking, okay, this is clear, go for it on 4th down territory, because you want to get into more comfortable field goal range at the very least, and you want to get up 2 scores. So the TCU calls a timeout. It's a little early in the fourth quarter to call your first timeout, but not unreasonable at that point, in my opinion, to say 3rd and 2, kind of a big moment. Let's call a timeout. Just make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
And at this point too, hey, if we kind of know that we're going to go for it, let's just remind people situationally, right? Because we saw some situational stuff previously where TCU didn't look fully prepared to go for it and it messed up. So let's just make sure, hey, some reminders to players, reminders to Hoover, that kind of stuff. Let's get the fourth down play call in right now. So if we want to get up to the line really quickly, we can do that. So they call the timeout. They have the conversation, however that goes. And a bad snap just totally derails the play. Like, there's nothing you can do when a snap's at Josh Hoover's ankles and he can't even get the ball up to hand it off to Battle, who I think had a little bit of a lane if the timing wasn't screwed on the play. So instead of Trent Battle runs for a yard, maybe gets the first down, or you're sitting 4th and 1, bad snap, Hoover can't make the handoff, he gets planted 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, now you're sitting 4th and 4. Hoover pops up, a little bit of chaos after the snap, trying to get everything settled, and obviously you're in a different situation than you talked about in the timeout. So that plan, out the window. Clock's running down. Kendall Briles is trying to get the call in because it appears like TCU is going to go for it. But then they sub again. And Utah subs. And now the play clock's at 2 seconds, and you don't have your 4th and 4 play set, and a Utah defensive tackle is still running onto the football field, and so you have to burn another timeout. And so you come back to the sideline, and the conversation at that point is, are we still going to go for it on 4th and 4? Are we going to play field position and punt? By the way, the clock is run. It's under 12 minutes left in the game now. You're up 6. And all of the analytics, everything, says 4th and 5 or less from this situation, you go for it.
Go for it.
And I can understand Sonny's argument, because in postgame he said, we thought field, like, yes, we understood the analytics said go for it. He's got a guy, Jeff Jordan, who has a whole binder that of every situation possible, and he was in Sonny's ear in that moment, that says the binder says to go for it. Sonny made the decision to play field position. Whether you agree or disagree with him, his prerogative, and it worked out.
Yeah,
But
it's not a terrible choice. I think go for it, absolutely. But I think with the chaos before, like, you can understand not going for it. I would have gone for it. You probably would have gone for it. Most people. Yeah. But it wasn't a grievous decision to punt, and it didn't work out like you mentioned.
No, but I think
that's not where the grievous decision is.
The chaos of the moment created a situation where you burned a second timeout to talk about it more, and to make a decision. And then you took a delay of game.
Yes.
And punted the football. So you burned a timeout to avoid a delay of game, and then you took a delay of game.
Yes.
And punted.
That to me was the grievous part of all of this.
And that's not, like, I understand that in that moment the plan had been derailed. Like, a bad snap totally botched everything that they were trying to do. And that's I just talked about a coaching issue. That is a very clear execution issue, and TCU's had some snapping issues the last couple of weeks with low snaps, and so it reared its head in a really bad moment, and it cost them. The decision making has to happen a little quicker, I think, to say plan didn't work, take the delay and punt.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're going to take the delay, take the delay. I don't care about that. Take the extra 5 yards to give Crawl a little bit of a better setup to punt. People do that all the time. That's normal. Don't burn your second time out in a one-possession game to ultimately come to the same conclusion that you were probably going to come to. It was a really concerning moment because it was a one-possession game. Utah had just had their big kind of home run touchdown. The crowd was getting back into it a little bit. You felt like momentum was shifting. Now, to Ethan Crawl's credit, that was a hell of a punt.
Yeah.
Because he pinned Utah at the 3. TCU forces a punt from there, and things go on the way that they go on, and TCU ends up winning. But it's just, there are moments like that, it seems, almost every week, where there's unintended chaos or unexpected chaos, and the TCU response is like, oh, like they're almost on their heels from it.
Yeah.
Instead of, hey, situation, here's the plan, execute the plan, right?
Especially from a coaching staff that is this veteran and experienced. There shouldn't be a lot of surprises left in football and that's aside from the new rules and the adjustments, all those types of things.
Sure,
But
yeah.
but yeah, I don't think anybody. There's really two options there. You go for it. You have your fourth down. You have your money play that you want to run in that situation. You should be able to dial that up pretty quickly. The thing you're most comfortable with in that fourth or third and short, or you say, hey, and a study said post game. You look at the stats, you look at the analytics, but at the end of the day, you play the game. And the way this game was going, we felt field position was more important in that moment, which, again, I don't necessarily agree with, but I don't have a problem with. But why did you have to use 2 timeouts and take a penalty to come up with that decision? That to me was, like you said, it was concerning because it did seem like things were getting away from them. And if TCU had lost, I think that's the moment every TCU fan would have pointed to and been like, this is where we lost faith.
Oh,
and
that would have been that coupled with the blocked field goal and the red zone turnover.
Yeah,
that would have been
it also
unmitigated chaos after that.
Also, the catching the interception on fourth down was James, right? That was Scud, right?
No, it was Bud.
It was Bud. That's right.
Bud made the interception and brought it down on fourth down. Scud was the one who batted it down late.
Yes, that's right. Okay, I got those.
Yeah.
I was walking down to the field as I was delivering a phone to our friend in the stands as that was happening, so I did not have a good view of what was happening. So yeah. So and again for Bud, a dude who's been around forever, you are just. I was talking to Parker as that happened, and we both just went like, that is like. You cannot. They are baiting you almost into that turnover there, hoping that you will give the ball right back. Again, playing the field position game almost. That was such a better play for them than if you just simply bat it down. So, and then Scud James made the better decision at the end of the game that ultimately allowed TCU to kind of wind out the clock. But yeah, those are the types of things where, again, like we talk about this after the losses. It's, hey, team is undisciplined. We've talked about the penalties. We say, oh, we have all these great weeks of practice, and we come out, doesn't show up in games. You get a win, but those same issues have not been absolved. And coming out of a bye week, those are the types of things you hope you would have seen some level of improvement in. But again, would rather be talking about these things after a win, especially a conference road win, than after a loss. And so it's our job to nitpick, not to celebrate. We get to do a little bit of that too, but yeah, I mean, I want to see TCU keep winning. I don't want to play this every other game, success and failure. I want to see them string together some wins against some big time rivals. This is an important stretch of the season for the Frogs. It is a hugely important stretch when you talk 3 in a row of Texas Tech, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. Like, these are the teams that you are competing with in every aspect of your football program, on the recruiting trail, with NIL dollars, with national attention. Like, these are the teams that you expect to be consistently at or near the top of the conference, maybe with the exception of Baylor, but we'll see what happens with them after the season. But Texas Tech is where you want to be this year. Oklahoma State has accomplished what you want to be accomplishing year in and year out. They're obviously having a down season, but this is a huge stretch for how people are going to talk about you when you're out trying to talk to players.
It is. But, like I said, a good win, a win that should be celebrated, and still some things to clean up. Still some concerns with this team that have persisted to week 8 that maybe should have been cleaned up by weeks 3 or 4.
Yes.
TCU goes back to Fort Worth now. They will host Texas Tech this upcoming weekend. Battle for the Saddle at 2:30 p.m. on Fox. Should be a fun one. Tech is reeling a little bit after the whipping they took from Baylor. The Big 12 is just in a complete state of chaos. Iowa State had to hold on to beat UCF. They scored a touchdown, I believe, with 30 seconds left. Rocco Becht put together an incredible drive to keep the Cyclones unscathed. 7-0 now. BYU had to score a touchdown late. Oklahoma State did the when you have like a kid who gets to come onto the football field and then all of the players like let them score the touchdown, so
like a make-a-wish event,
or like older. There's one video that I recall from a couple years ago where it's like this really old gentleman who's doing that. that was what Oklahoma State's tackling was like on the final play of that game in Provo on Friday night because, Jake Retzlaff just dropped back, hit a guy about 15 yards downfield, and then he made 3 or 4 Cowboys miss on his way to the end zone for that win.
No time on the clock. I mean, if he tackles them, that game's over. Oklahoma State gets the win, and and little Provo had to BYU.
There's no soaking in Provo that night.
Yeah. No. Oh God. Jamie. Listen. BYU feels a little bit like they've got that 2022 TCU magic, right? Of where the balls keep bouncing their way. Speaking of soaking, that they have the luck. Yeah, you did. Yeah, they've got a little bit of luck. They've got a little bit of the magic. They've got a little bit of that juice. And especially at quarterback, like there's not a game that I've looked at Jake Retzlaff's stats and been like, dude, this kid is dominant. But he's a gamer, man. He makes plays.
Can I talk about some breaking news?
Please, absolutely. Breaking news live on the pod.
Friend of the podcast, Steve Bartle, has just tweeted 10 minutes ago, Utah offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig has stepped down.
No. We broke Andy Ludwig and Utah. I'm sure he was encouraged to step down. I
don't know. I mean, probably. Let's see. Wow. Here's a statement from Kyle Whittingham. Assistant coach Andy Ludwig has made the decision to step down from his position with Utah football. Andy is the consummate professional, and we want to thank him for his complete dedication to our program during his 10 total seasons with us. Coach Ludwig has been instrumental to our success here at Utah, and personally, I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for Andy as both a coach and a person. We wish him nothing but the best in all of his future endeavors.
Wow.
I'll be interested to see who takes over for the rest of the year.
Yeah, who's going to be calling plays? And you're going to be doing it with a freshman quarterback too. Wow, Utah. I think it's so. I don't want to dig at the Pac-12 whatsoever, but it's so interesting in that, myself included, so many of us just expected Utah to come in and be dominant. Now, a lot of this is out of their control. Losing Cam Rising, but also betting on Cam Rising to be the guy was maybe poor planning as well.
Are they going to bet on him again next year because he has another medical red shirt he can use?
So it's I think this conference, we'll see. I don't want to worry about the postseason, the playoffs, bowl games, anything like that. This conference has been fun, and the games have been fun, and the fact that Iowa State and BYU are sitting atop of it is in some degree fun. You are going to be entertained watching this game, unless you're watching TCU Utah Saturday night, which was not a very exciting game for most people. But wow, that's this. I think it just shows how wide open this conference can be year to year, which is why it's again so frustrating and disappointing to not see TCU grabbing a hold of the reins that are so clearly right out in front of them. But you've got 5 games to do it. Anything can happen.
5 games to do it, and it would be impossible if you lost on Saturday. Yeah. So you haven't fully eliminated yourself from some fun opportunities that could await down the road. Is this a college football playoff team? No. Is this a Big 12 championship team? No. But
probably not. Yeah.
This is a team that can still, as all of the burners are saying, 9-3. Yeah. Who knows?
And we both were 7-5, 8-4. Like that's still potentially on the table. And
very
7-8 wins would be not necessarily a success, but at least a step in the right direction.
100%. 100% it would.
Do we want to talk about teams that have no desire to try to go 7-5 or 9-3 even on the season? Because as we've mentioned, week in and week out now, TCU's women's teams, especially in soccer and volleyball, are absolutely lighting things on fire. Soccer went up to Ames this afternoon, Sunday, the day we're recording, and won 4-1 against Iowa State. They have not lost in conference play. The only blemish on their record is a tie against Texas Tech. They are very well positioned with just a couple games remaining to have the number 1 or number 2 seed in the Big 12 conference tournament, and certainly look like a team that will be hosting in the early rounds of the NCAA tournament. And it's just it's how they're doing it. The defense has been great. The goalkeeping has been exceptional. But they are just relentless in attacking offensively. And Bella Diorio had 2 more goals today. Caroline Kelly had another goal. AJ Hennessy has really come on from a scoring perspective. She's kind of a creator and a chaos agent generally, but she's been putting the ball in the back of the net the last couple of games as well. And having another person that can go score goals like that, I think is so critical. And again, the depth of this team is unbelievable. So I am so excited for the regular season to end and get to postseason play. And I really think this team has the opportunity to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. But first and foremost, I know Eric Bell's goal is to win a Big 12 regular season championship, and then, of course, to win a Big 12 conference tournament championship. They'll have a tough one at Oklahoma State. It's not going to get any easier for TCU soccer here, but they are certainly playing at a level to where you're not going to look at anybody ahead of the schedule at any level of postseason play and be concerned. So they'll finish up on the road at Oklahoma State next Friday, final regular season game, and then I believe the Big 12 tournament is in Kansas City. So definitely keep your eyes tuned to ESPN Plus. And be watching that program as they kind of close out the regular season and get ready for postseason play.
Little standings update: TCU still sits atop the Big 12, 8-0-2. Texas Tech also 8-0-2. West Virginia's a couple games behind at 7-2-1, and then nobody else has more than 6 wins. So TCU set themselves up phenomenally at this point in the year. Like you said, they're still a wagon when it comes to who can score, when they can score, how they can score. Like, it can come from anywhere, man, and it's just so much fun to watch. It truly is. I was hopeful that we would have landed in time today to watch the game against Iowa State, but we were still in the air, and frankly, I passed out. I fell asleep.
Yes,
so
as did I.
But shout out to TCU soccer for doing the thing, and then TCU volleyball. Just, I mean, they took on Cincinnati on Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at Schollmeyer. They lost the first set a little surprisingly, and then came back and just absolutely hammered Cincinnati for the next 3. So another win under their belt, which was really fun to see, and just another team that is ready to rock. I think they're ready. They got so much time left on their schedule. They got so many games left, but it's like they feel tournament ready right now. Like, they're just any point they could just hit that switch and go.
Shout out to Melanie Parra, who hit the 1,000 kills mark in her career. Again, just very much on the path to being an All-American this season. They have, Baylor volleyball has been a powerhouse. Not necessarily that this year, but they have a massive game match down in Waco on Friday. So both soccer and volleyball are getting a chance to regroup a bit this week, getting some time to kind of rest and refresh before playing pretty big games Friday night, both of them on the road. Friday night also brings a little excitement to TCU's campus, even with all of the teams away, as 2 Chainz will be at Schollmeyer Arena for Schollmeyer Live, as we get ever so close to the start of basketball season. Media days are this week, Jamie, and you're going to be heading up to Kansas City for that, aren't you?
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Excited to talk to some players and kind of hear a little bit more about what the season expectations are. I've been around the men's team quite a bit this offseason, watching a bunch of practices, getting to know some of the new faces on the squad. They went down to San Antonio this weekend and played a secret scrimmage with Texas that they ended up losing by quite a bit. But if you'll recall, they hammered Alabama in a secret scrimmage each of the last 2 years by like 30 or 40 points, and that had no relevance or bearing on the outcome of the season. So just an opportunity to see some different faces, get some reps under your belt, some live fire before the season starts. Men's basketball will play at Dickey's against Arkansas November 1st. That is open to the public. Tickets are on sale now, so everybody should go to Dickey's and see the men's team as they get things rolling. Interesting. 3 players from each team will be in Kansas City for media days. For the men, it's Ernest Uday, the only TCU player to log minutes for TCU last season, along with Frankie Collins, the guard from Arizona State, and Noah Reynolds, the guard from Green Bay, who Dixon has already publicly kind of ID'd as those are the leaders. They've stepped in right away and have been leaders for the team. kind of nice to have your point guards be your vocal leaders. I think as you as a basketball coach know, that's kind of
Coach
the
on the
floor
floor.
general, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have them be that leader off on the sidelines and in practices as well. And then the women will be taking Madison Connor, Sedona Prince, and Haley Van Lith. So I'm sure that the women's basketball media day on Tuesday will be an absolute firestorm.
Yes.
Around all of the things. I mean, just it could, if it was only TCU showing up, it would be
still.
chaotic as all get out. And so
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what that day looks like as well.
Yeah, we've also got purple and white scrimmage for TCU
Yep.
baseball was announced. So, I mean, you could have a heck of a day on Friday. Show up for TCU baseball. I believe 2:30 first pitch.
First pitch,
and then
2:30.
Go grab yourself. Go over to Dutch's or Buffalo Bros. Grab some dinner, maybe a bev or two, and head over to Schollmeyer for 2 Chainz and some basketball skills competitions. And then Saturday, of course, Texas Tech comes down. It's TCU's homecoming back in Fort Worth. I think we want to see this team protect the Carter. That's been lost a little bit this season with a couple of conference losses at home. This is a huge game. It's an important game for both teams. Tech obviously is reeling. TCU is hopefully coming in with a little bit more confidence. This could be a big weekend for TCU across the entirety of the athletics department. I know we need to touch on beach volleyball. They've been killing it. They started out really strong. I know that women's triathlon and rifle have both been doing excellent things. There are so many different things that we can talk about. But we've already gone over our hour, and Jamie and I both are suffering from extreme lack of sleep. And so I think we close it out here, Jamie.
That's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. She's Melissa Treebwasser. I am Jamie Plunkett, and we will be back later this week with a Texas Tech preview. Melissa's going to sit down with the Gambling Gauchos to
Can't
break
wait.
down that game and just do a general vibes and wellness check for those guys. And then I'll be back with something else as well. So we will talk to you next time. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.